Hello,
Welcome
hello,
to the
hello.
second stream. We have arrived. Somehow we did it. The next goal here.
Yes,
Yes, and we will
and somehow we'll keep doing it.
Right.
1 week at a time. And this week we are talking about what exactly?
Well, this week we're talking about this strange and rather interesting thing called sustenance. Food. I mean, food.
Food, yay, food.
And more specifically, um, we are talking about um, your absolute favorite fantasy or sci-fi foods. I mean, of course, they are inspired by real foods, so technically, eh, yeah, basically that's our main theme, and as a sub theme and linked with our primary theme is how writing about foods in our stories and universes helps flesh everything um, and make it feel and read more complete, which you I think you'll agree that I mean a nice scene with the our heroes feasting and even the villains feasting kind of gives the story a certain um, pizzazz, if I can say so myself.
Yes. Now, I love the idea of having food in everything. I think we forget as writers sometimes so much of our writing depends on what is seen and we describe how things look. But it's the taste and the smell of a world that really captures everybody. When we start talking about how things smell, even if it's a bad smell, we frequently
Mhm.
overlook that stuff. But when we start talking about taste, what a big part it is of our lives. And when we include those scenes and those foods, especially when they're unique to the world or they're unique to a particular culture, it really, I think it opens up a whole tapestry of experiences for the reader. And I know for me personally, it's like when everything else is really bad, that ice cream makes it better. And so there's this sweet life, whatever it is. We talked a lot about it last time about horchata. About if you have a comfort food that's just like it's the one that hits. It's like that's what your grandma made for you or something like that. It's when you have those foods, it brings us back to that comfortable place, and we can tell our readers so much about our characters just by what foods they love.
Oh yes, or what foods they make and what foods they share and as you just mentioned, like there is that cultural aspect of it, and since bar some historical fiction, we are fantasizing about stuff, but the best like many have said before us, the best things that we craft with our minds are perhaps the things that are based upon reality, upon something that we know or felt or experienced. So yeah,
Yeah, and I
James.
think one great thing about food that I would actually advise like newer writers is actually to kind of incorporate food into your writing, because the great thing about it is it kind of forces you to activate the senses and step away from simple descriptions when you're talking about
Mm,
food, because you don't just see food, you smell it, it's in the other room, it smells succulent, you can hear it sizzling on the grill. It kind of it's an easy way of introducing the senses into your writing and break out
indeed.
of that write what you see kind of script writing style that a lot of beginners kind of run with at the beginning.
Yeah, I kind of because I've been writing all day. I kind of forgot like that. We are not just describing the taste of food and the smell of food, but the sound of it.
Oh,
The sound of it, yes. How
so
it's
I'm,
boiling or sizzling.
I'm going to preface this by saying, how okay, James and Black Knight, did y'all eat before you did the stream, or are you hungry right now?
Uh, I I think I had like early evening meal.
Yeah.
Some hours ago, I had like nice pork chop with some
So
potatoes.
you're hungry. James, have you eaten yet today?
Oh yeah, I've eaten. It's like three. What's past three over here? Let's see, what did I eat today? I know I had at least one cup of noodles, something nice and simple, because it's a bit of a work day early, and I spend some time getting ready for the stream. So I try to put something together. I think I had more succulent food yesterday, as I had some dumplings yesterday, which
Oh,
made me
good.
want noodles today. So I was
Oh,
like, yeah, some nice pork dumplings with some teriyaki on top. That's one beautiful thing about a multicultural, is that you can get foods from around the world with a cultural zest upon them.
yes.
And by cultural zest, I mean you can buy them in the supermarket. Just get them out of the bag. Eat them in the 30 minutes.
Yes.
Had pot stickers with some salad that my daughter made me, and I was laughing though because usually we do these streams, and I always write for some reason. I write when I'm hungry. It makes the scene so much better. If I'm going to write about food,
Mm,
not eat before I write it. Instead, I let my hunger drive the scene. And in my book, of course, we're I guess we're it's hard to describe Watcher the Dam, but it is a sort of a sci-fi Western fantasy post-apocalyptic, but it's almost like future history. And because it's based in Texas, I can reach into, like James said, this vast multicultural uh, group that we have down here. And of course, we have a lot of Tex-Mex, so uh, I end up talking about things I've actually made myself, but how we would make them in a survivalist society. If you don't have, and if you've ever used cornmeal, you'll know that there's a difference between cornmeal and masa. Masa is different. Masa is the bread of life. It's nixtamalized. That means that you have to prepare it a certain way with lime and ash. You have to use a particular type of process called nixtamalization, and American pioneers called it hominy. But if you're using Tex-Mex culture, you have to use that or you don't get all the vitamin B. So we have to describe how they would actually get the masa and how they would actually try to transport it. How do you keep it safe from rats and things? And then how do you get it to your table? And it's not just opening a bag of tortillas. You got to know how to pat the tortillas. And if you don't have a press, you got to pat just right, or else it sticks to your hands. And you got to make sure you get your hands prepared. I have a whole scene where it's just Rose imitating her father, and she can't get the tortillas thin enough, and so they just become gorditas instead because she can't get them thin enough to get them patted down. And so when I was writing it, texture actually came up about how the masa actually sticks to your hands, and if you don't do it right, it will stick, and you have to get it just right. And of course, Rose is like me; I don't get it right all the time. So I was really excited to write those things. And writing it when you're hungry, you can smell it, you can taste it, you can feel it. Food incorporates all the textures. Everything to know about a human being is learned about them through the process of cooking and eating.
and by the way, masa in Bulgarian means stable.
Table, really?
Yep.
I
Yep.
didn't know. Cool.
And
Um,
speaking of that, it's like another thing you can go with, because like fiction being at the center of this all. I write from a completely fictional standpoint, as you write from a sort of historical standpoint. So you can actually pull from existing culture. Well, on my end, I kind of pulls from like the land where they're at. Like if
Oh
they're in a
yeah.
jungle land where they're going to have more fruits in their diets, and maybe larger types of leaves and a variety and less of a variety of meats and maybe even some grubs and things like that. And if they're in a desert landscape, they may feast on some meat, but maybe mostly, once again, live off of simple things off the land, because there's actually a lot of things in the land in your own backyard you can technically eat, like your basic grass you can technically eat. And if you were to take that simple knowledge and put it in an apocalyptic scenario, what sort of foods would they make with grass, and maybe they'll try to mimic something of the past with foods that exist now that may not may no longer exist or have not exist in the past, like maybe some sort of radioactive roach in a radioactive roach on a stick. But the
Yeah,
interesting thing that another thing is, because you mentioned masa. Masa is obviously something that they use in tamales, and tamales is essentially a corn
Yes.
husk
Uh-huh.
that you can just lay out the masa on top, and then you stuff it with whatever you want. And I remember we had some tamales not too long ago, and I found it kind of funny because I said, "What kind of tamales are these?" And they said, "Oh, they're corn tamales." I said, "Well, these must be some of the most original tamales, because it's essentially a corn husk slapped down with corn, stuffed with corn." And that got my mind thinking, is like, imagine the sheer tiredness of just eating corn, that they had to go out of their way to make the corn tamales. Like, we need to do something else with this. It needs to taste like something else.
I think you're right. And actually, people don't realize that the old ways, and so many times we tell these stories now, a lot of times if you're in a future society that's very technologically advanced, they have the ability just to snap their fingers and food comes out fully prepared. But when you're writing dystopian or science fiction that is more post-apocalyptic in nature, or dealing with but for instance, Ryan Williamson's, where he's actually Doomsday Recon, where he's on the planet but they've gone back in time. How do they fix it? Going back to those old ways, going back and finding an old person from your family that has done those things, and you go, well, how did you cook this when you didn't have like a phone to pick up, or just go to the store and get this thing? They will tell you how it was made, and you can incorporate even into a fantasy setting. You can say, okay, we know that somebody had to use something for a plate or some way to wrap it up. Well, the corn husks are just you can also make tamales with I think banana leaves. You can make it with other things. You can use it, you wrap it up, and it steams it. When you put it on the thing, the wet leaves actually steam it. And so that's how you steam it. When you don't have a big old steamer like you got at your granny's house, you actually wrap it up in a green leaf, making sure it's not toxic, and you put it, because you can get a hold of a toxic leaf that way. But and the same thing with grass. I've got a wonderful resource. It's actually foragingtexas.com. The gentleman, I know him, his name is Dr. Meriwether Vorderbroeken. And I have a long-standing relationship with him. I've known him since, I had gone to his site back in the early 2000s when he first started it. I think it was 2009, 2010. And he is a foraging expert. And he actually talks about all the things, James, that you talked about, going out in your yard, the things that we can eat that we don't realize they're available to us. Lizards, mice, things like that. But he focuses specifically on plants and what is available in your backyard, and sometimes found all over the country, or some of it's just in Texas. And it was so inspirational to me that I actually have him credited in the back of Watch for the Damned for the survivalist points of the story, because my group has to find things to eat while they're on the road. And so we actually talk about real things, and we have to be careful, because we don't want to give somebody bad advice and go, oh, I went out and I found a plant that looked like your book, and then it turns out it was poisonous. So we tell just enough, and then we say, and actually my one of my characters, and I'll have this run in just a minute, has an item, and it was something I had, and I was like, she could have this. It would be something that she'd have that would be a relic from an earlier time. And it's actually a bandana that's made by wazoo.com, and it has all the plants on it. So I tell people how she looks at her plant, and she's able to see that this was from the great ancestors from beyond, and the saints of the survivalist church that she's a part of. And of course, they've gotten this relic handed down. They think it's sacred. And she managed to get a hold of it. And it tells her how to use the plant, what to do with it. And it was so extraordinary that these were real things that I had available to me, and I wanted my characters to have it. So when you cook grass, because it has so much cellulose in it, it makes it hard to digest. And people sometimes, when they really do get hungry, they'll try to go out and find grass to eat. Well, of course, grass, you can eat the seed heads. If you have the right ones, you can eat the seed heads and chew them. You have to spit it out though, because you can't really digest it if it's not cooked. So the best way to eat grass is simply to chew it to get the juice out of it, or you make it into a tea or a broth, and then you get rid of all that cellulose. Go ahead and just pull it out in the handfuls, strain it to make sure it's clean. Always making sure, of course, that you have double checked that this is an edible source of food. And there are so many great books out there, but if you don't have something, go to texasforaging.com, and it will have, and I'm going to make sure that I've got that just right, because that is one of the places where it is an incredible source for writers. If you're saying I've got my character traveling through some sort of desert or something like that, you can always go to foragingtexas.com, and it will have it. And this is Rose's. This is the bandana that I actually have in the book, and I don't know if you can see it really well, but it's actually, that's the wazoo.com bandana. You can get it at wazoo.com, and it's from Foraging Texas. Be thy food, be thy medicine. And it has plants on it that are medicinal. It has plants on it that are also food. And so I have this in my possession prior to me writing the book because I love survivalism. I actually was a primitive camper with the Boy Scouts of America, and I taught them how to live off the land. And so that's incorporated into the book. And finding those plants, they're out there, they're available. It is harder than you think because we are so used to calories. There's a reason why our ancestors love masa and corn and wheat and things like that, because there's so many calories in the potatoes. A potato is a gift from God if you know what you're doing. But finding those calories in plants is actually really hard. And that's the reason why most primitive cultures also will hunt, or they will have some sort of agricultural base to go and fall back on. Because it is really hard to find those calories in wild foods unless you know what you're doing and make sure that you're able to keep going back to your source to get more calories.
That's very true. I believe it was actually the at least the American pioneers that they almost exclusively ate meat and just hunted all the time.
Yeah, because it wasn't like sometimes the weather would change and it will destroy the crops,
Mhm.
and they could still go and hunt for like deer, elk, bison, and pigs, of course,
Oh, yeah.
and fish. Yeah, so yeah, that's until you have a lot of chemicals and technology, but the use of chemical fertilizer is kind of screwing things a lot, and people are going. By the way, they're going back to old school, old timer farming, and you can find. When I was doing, by the way, research for my books, um, because as you know, Lily, she's a farmer. I mean, she's a watermelon farmer, but she's still a farmer. She can grow she can grow lots of stuff. And I had to research, do a bit of a research of like old school farming,
Oh, yeah.
because they are in free space, they are in the colonies. I mean, they have tech, but they are far away from like the big industrial centers,
Uh-huh.
and they, of course, they are hardy. They are like the frontiersmen in America back in the day when they were moving with just like a wagon and a couple of tools, like and cooking utensils. um, they can fix stuff, but they can't always fix everything,
That's
and
right.
so they have to be like an extra level of self-sufficient. And so when I read about it, I remember like an old farmer who said, like, he gave a story when some corporate guy came and said, yes, we're going to give you like this free chemical fertilizer. You're going to dump it all over your land, and you'll get like your corn will be huge, like you'll have super high yield and stuff. And the farmer was that, but this chemical bad for like for the bugs and the other plants and everything else? And And the corpo guy was like, "Nah, you don't have to worry. Everything is fine. Everything will be fine. Like it's totally safe. It's super safe and efficient." And now we know that it's efficient, but it's not safe.
Yeah,
And it's basically killing the soil. It's killing the soil.
well, and it kind of that actually comes up in Watch with the Dams as well, because when you have that, actually, when I wrote the book, when I first wrote it, the Great Reset wasn't a thing. So we talked about how they basically reset humanity and they have to start over from scratch. Well, of course, they have some of the knowledge. Some of them have a little knowledge, but when you have a mass die-off, most people don't know how to farm. They don't know what to do. Reestablishing agriculture takes about 50 years. If you have all the knowledge and you have everything, how do you find seeds? What do you do? How do you get those plants to go where you are? And you can only plant and grow what is going to be available to your area. So you have, and in Texas, we have a very specific climate. Actually, we've got several climates in the state itself. But in the Texas Taos Co-op, where our group lives, which is in central Texas, basically in a strip from north to south, all the way from Dallas to Houston, between the Trinity River and the Brazos River. So it's the old cotton farming area. And so I know this land really well because my mother farmed it. She was a sharecropper's daughter. She grew up picking cotton and living off the land, and she knew what to eat. By golly, if she saw something, if it was a turtle, she'd go, "That's good eating." If it's a squirrel, she'd go, "You can cook it this way." And you're right, they would hunt whenever they could, but of course overhunting happens. And what do you have to do? You have to learn how to survive off the land. And so she knew how to grow things. So in our book itself, I had to study about how did they do it in the 1800s? Because that's kind of that timeline. You go from there's no crops whatsoever to there's crops. But you're not dealing with pristine prairie anymore. You're dealing with a world that's been blighted and people have died and the equipment is leaking oil and chemicals and stuff. And there are places where you can't grow anything because when that gets in the soil, you're not going to grow anything there. That's how you kill a plant. So there's pockets of soil that are still available, and they go out there and they farm it and they do these things, and they have to do something with it. You can grow plants all day long, but if you can't get that plant from the growth to your face, if you can't learn how to preserve it, I mean, you can. How many have y'all ever done that? You have a garden. Have you ever been so overwhelmed with squash that you just don't know what to do with all of it, James? Have you ever had like
habaneros?
Uh,
habaneros? Oh my god!
Yeah, we're growing some right now in the backyard. Not too many though, but yeah, we've definitely had an overflow of habaneros before.
I can teach you how to make Bulgarian lutenica with habaneros.
There we go. Hey, if we get to 100 subscribers,
Yeah,
we'll make a video of making that along with.
Oh yeah.
gosh, that would be so
Oh
fun.
yeah.
I have taken some and made my own hot sauce out of it, which
Have you
was
done
much easier than I thought. Though I don't like spicy foods, I'm told it was decent.
But, okay, now how did you preserve it? How did you keep it fresh? Like, oh, so what did,
When it came to the habaneros themselves, well, in general, vinegar. Very easy.
Oh
You
yeah.
just put them in a can. You're usually good for a while. And same with the hot sauce. A lot of hot sauces kind of got a same kind of tangy taste, and that's the vinegar in there meant to keep it over time, because it is essentially just a liquefied version of a variety of vegetables in the bottle there for you.
that's why your ancestors pickled things. They
Yep.
old folks used to pickle everything.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Don't you
Everything.
pickle?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything.
And then canning as well later on during the Industrial Revolution. Canning was also very big, and I still do that myself. You can easily get just some of those mason jars.
Mhm.
Very easy to do that. I believe you just it's been a little while, but you fill them up to the brim. You get all the little air bubbles out of there, and you kind of just seal them up nice and tight. And you put them in a giant bucket of water, and you kind of just boil them up until the lids kind of go inward, press inward. That's when they get like nice and sealed. And then you just gotta put them in like a nice dark area where it doesn't get too much sunlight, and you're good. So
this is what we call here in like most Slavic countries. This is what we called like grandma jars.
Yeah.
And pretty much you can stuff them with all kinds of meat that you have and veggies, and you just have to like boil them really well. um, of course, they should be closed. They should be like tightly screwed, like the lids. And when they pop down, you know that they're sealed. And especially my grandma, she, when we had meat, because under communism we didn't have a lot of meat,
Yeah.
but when we had, she kind of used bits, like the fatty bits, and she placed them on top. So when they melt, like you have a layer of fat
Oh,
on top of the like the contents of your jar, and that would seal, and make make them last longer. Yeah.
yeah. In
That's
fact,
really cool.
no, that's it. When we're talking about the worlds that we're in, so like I said, the worlds that we're writing, for instance, whether you're writing a space opera or you're writing, space operas have their own issues because you have people that are out in space. Do they have access
Oh, yeah.
to Earth? They
I,
have,
I, I, I will say a couple of words about that, because it's when we are talking about farming, we have to talk, and it's in space. We have to talk about hydroponics and how we can grow plants without soil. It's and I mean, the climate here down on our Mother Earth can sometimes like kill everything.
yeah.
You just need one tornado or like a flash flood, and everything is gone. Like how homes, roads, like nothing's there. In space, it's probably even worse. Just one broken or pierced bulkhead, and I mean, just the radiation. It's like different types of radiation themselves. It's like it's not just an uphill battle. It's like you're trying to climb these. You know how they have in different parts of the world these long poles, and they smear them with fat, and it's like a contest who can like whom on the back of the village could climb the pole.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like growing food in space. It's something like this. So yeah.
But yeah, and when you talk about those challenges, actually, that's a different type of primitive. There's no soil. There's no. How do you grow something without soil? Well, you just said hydroponics. But then you talk about one power outage. Now you can actually grow hydroponically without power. You can grow, and you have to have a light source, things like that. And of course, that means growing things that maybe can grow well in low light, that's sometimes very difficult. Mushrooms come to mind. Mushrooms are a great source of vitamin B and a few other things. But so that would be something that could probably be grown in space with the waste products that you have from your bulkhead, from your crew itself, because that's fertilizer. Anytime you have animals, the reason that farms used to have a set of animals, and they would take all that manure and they would break it down in the hay, and they would make sure that it broke down into the elements of nitrogen and all the fertilizer that they needed, and they would put that aside. And when you're establishing any kind of agricultural system in your world, you can have a completely fantasy where they just snap their fingers and grow it. That's what happens in some Midwest regions. Literally, they stare at the plants. There's just rain and there's just enough sun. I have never lived in a place like that. Texas can be brutal, and James, you said literally you said it. When our winter is summer, now we have brutal winters too. We'll get down to zero, but the middle of the summer is almost as inhospitable in some of the places, even where it rains, as it would be for winter. We just stop growing stuff. Usually, I know people that grow all the way through. I usually stop trying to grow so much right about mid-July. You let it shut down, and then you have a fall garden. So you have a spring garden, which starts in January, February. And then you have a fall garden, which starts actually somewhere at the end, about in mid-August or so. And you use it as 2 seasons of growing. But the summer, you can't grow anything. And there's hailstorms, like you said, there's rain. Every place has its own challenges. And when you're writing those in, you're not just giving your readers a beautiful fantasy, you're giving them actual information. The whole point of literature is to spark the imagination of the reader. It's to give them something that when they put the book down, they're like, wow, that just, it not only captures the imagination, it gives them something real to hold on to, whether it's heroism or a new philosophy or a way of looking at the world differently, but also real information. And I think that was when I was writing Watcher the Damned, I was like, how would they do it if they didn't have vinegar? Because my mother, when I talked to her, she would talk about pickling. And so there was a whole bunch of pickling going on. You had to rely on two things, salt and vinegar. Fat also. Fat is the one actually that people don't realize because we don't use it as much as vilified in our society. But the way that you first start off with preserving meats is fat, pemmican. And pemmican is the ultimate primitive food source. If you're talking about going back to the old ways, you go back to just high fat meat, fruits, and then it has maybe a little salt if you can find it. But salt is actually found naturally in some meats, and that's why they would hunt so much too. What do you do when you don't have a source of salt? When you're inland and you're not next to the ocean, so you can just put stuff down in the briny water, how are you going to do it? And since my story is inland, we have to talk about what they did and how they found it. First, they were scavenging it off the store shelves. But salt has become a hot commodity because now, after 50 years, those salvaged stores are gone. And there's no salt left. We have salt in Texas. We actually do have Morton Salt Plant. You've got ways to get salt from the ocean, but you have to have somebody to be able to get there. And it better not be polluted. You have to know how to get that out. So what do? You use fat from the animals that you have hunted. You render it and you put it down into pemmican. And so they eat a lot of pemmican, but one of their people has learned how to make vinegar. And we talk about the recipe for making vinegar, and it's like making wine. And a good vinegar made from a muscadine grape, and muscadine grapes are different. They're very astringent. They're a wild grape. Mustangs. Mustang grapes are a wild grape, and they're very astringent, and they grow plentiful out here in central Texas. And if you try to eat one off the vine, it looks beautiful. It's a big old purple thing, and your face will just pucker. It is just like, and why you want it. There is a reason that your ancestors loved sour and astringent fruits, because they would use them to make the vinegar. And that's plums, persimmons to a certain extent, wild persimmons, and these Mustang grapes. And so in the story, we talk about how they would find the Mustang grapes, what they look like. How do they make vinegar? And this one fella, there's a plantation where all he does is he makes vinegar and sells it to the other plantations. And now you have a process of saying, okay, he's got vinegar, he's got smoked, a way to smoke the meats. Smoking is the other way. Put it in that smoker and setting it out there for a long time. And with a combination of fats and smoke, you've now got a way to make these foods. And one of the main storylines that actually occurs as our world gets bigger is what happens to the world when these systems start to fail. If you have a revolution, what happens to your vinegar supplier if he's also involved in the revolution, or if somebody burns down his plantation where he's smoking these meats or making this vinegar? Or you're going to have a loss of life because you're going to have famine strike. Even in a very new world or primitive society, you have supply chain issues. So knowing how to make your foods work in the food world you're in and being realistic about their situation, I think really adds to it, because we have all of our food just comes to us. We literally packaged. I had my son eats like sardines out of a can, and people nearly died because they were like, I can't believe you'd eat a fish that looks like a fish, it had bones in it and everything. People have gotten so separated from their food sources, they no longer know how it really happens. And so just like on the holodeck of the Enterprise where somebody snaps their finger, food just appears. And it's really exciting when that happens. But we as writers and world building, how the food gets there, what they do when they do with it. Does anybody ever get sick from food poisoning? How many of y'all have ever had food poisoning? Let me ask that right now.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not fun.
I also had like beer poisoning.
Oh my God.
How fun. Speaking of beer, there's an interesting thing. The pilgrims that came to the United States, from where they came from, all the lakes were basically toxic from pollution over the years. So, and they had not yet discovered two major things we take for granted, and that is boiling water and coffee. So they drank distilled beer. At that time, they drank grog. Things had alcohol in them. and everybody to a degree was a bit of an alcoholic, just
Yeah.
because that's what they had. And when they got to the Americas, um, the water was clean, but they didn't know about clean water. All they knew was you don't drink water, and you don't, they didn't know how to boil it. So one of the first things they did is start to build distilleries so they could start to make beer here, because they were suffering from without it. But taking that into account, I think another great thing is if you have characters that are traveling from one land to another, the encounters they would have involving food, or maybe things they surround them that are edible that they wouldn't know. Like I actually stepped out a second ago because you're talking about the things that grow on Earth, and I got two leaves here. Let's see if I can show them off. Here's one of them. This is Malabar
I
spinach
love our spinach.
Yes.
that grows in hot locations. I'm sure you've got some where you are, and it grows wild. It's not a real spinach plant. It's actually a vine, but you could eat it just like this, and it's great for different salads, and it's actually a very sturdy leaf. So say if you like wrapping things in tortillas and you need a replacement, this is good. Usually people will use something like lettuce, but the issue with lettuce is it's flimsy and it's really watery. So very powerful. But this blends well with just about anything you wrap it in. It is more of an accented
Spinach.
flavor. So this
One
is
of
a
my
good one.
favorite things.
I got about 3 to 4 plants, and the crazy part is I'll have to show it off next time. But when the seeds start growing, it looks like these weird black tumors that just start growing off of the vine, and they eventually shrivel up and fall off. And I did it. I knew there was something. I assumed they were seeds because I just added these to my garden last season, so they're still new to me. And I just got a handful and I put them down, and they started growing like crazy. So I'm gonna be growing a lot of these, and they're gonna be great. And another one that I got right here is Jamaica. This is straight from a Jamaica plant, and you can see it's got this lovely purple tint to it. The reason it got this purple tint is because when you leave it in the sun, it turns purple. The entire plant has this purple tint on it, and I believe this is what they call cherry Jamaica. I could be wrong, but these you can make tea out of, and they're really good and full of antioxidants, or you can just eat them as is as well. But the Mexican culture often used them for tea. Didn't really make much tinctures, but lots and lots of teas, stuff like that. And
Cyanin, and it's also used against gout. So the old people would probably drink
medicinal. It's medicinal. And there's a lot of medicinal stuff. Like if you ever went to like a small Mexican shop before in the United States, you'll see that they got a lot of herbs just kind of in these tiny little bags hanging there. And, a lot of them are for spices. Some of them are actually for medicinal use. And then there's also almost like speaking of stories, how food itself can drive a story. I mentioned before I'm writing a story. I want to eventually get to writing a story about a restaurant and how food's at the center point. But not only that, but there's a genre of literature that's heavily centered around food, and that is the modern day, I guess, what do they call it? Murder mysteries, cozies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them that take place in a cafe, and they got 8 books, and then a lot of them release with full-blown cookbooks attached to them that are like this fictional cafe's cookbook. So even in subcultures within literature, if somebody wants to explore, I'd say when food is at the exact center, cozy mysteries is a way to go. And I wanted to share a story where food was actually in the exact center of it. And that was actually how my great grandfather met my great grandmother. And it's all because of food at the center of it.
Yes.
My great grandmother was a young, beautiful lady, and her father would go for months at a time to work and bring back what money he can. But they lived off the land, and they only had so much to eat, and they would survive off of stuff like this. And they were getting so tired of eating this. The children, there were like 8 kids. They're all fed up. The babies didn't want to eat it. They were crying. And one day, this cow, someone's cow, it has been lost, and it wanders up to them, and they're like, "We got it." They take the cow inside, and the place becomes a butcher shop, and they got meat everywhere. And a couple days pass, or a day passes, and then some cowboys come by saying, "Hey, we're looking for a
It's the
cow."
cow.
And the thing is, like, you got to realize, a cow back then, food is expensive when
Yes.
you do not have a grocery store there. It is
right.
a form of wealth. People would buy all these cattle, and that's how they would store their wealth, is in cattle.
Yes.
So to take someone's cattle is punishable by death back
Yes.
then. You could get killed for stealing someone's cattle. But they go up to them looking for the cattle. Have you seen the cow? No, we haven't. But amongst the cowboys was a man who saw that young lady and saw that she was very, very beautiful. So after coming back a couple of times to see her, her father would eventually return and forbid this well-off cowboy to see his daughter. But in the dead of night, he would drive up in one of these brand new automobiles, and she would be waiting for him, and he would kidnap her in the dead of night, and they'd run off to go get married.
That is so cute.
Yes.
True story, and then it all began with food.
Yeah, that is awesome.
That was so nice. Oh yes. Well, I think I should share my favorite kind of sci-fi-ish fantasy food, which is the stew, because you can incorporate a whole lot of different ingredients in a stew, and it has this specific thing about it, which kind of charges you with energy, almost like spiritual energy, after having hunted for it, or preserved the meats for it, or finding like the wild veggies for it. If you were talking about like a fantasy party, foraging through some forest, or even in a dungeon. If you know, if you have if you know dungeoneering, you should know which parts of the monsters even are edible, and which kind of, like, because the dungeon has its own ecosystem. And this stew, it's almost like it has additional layers of support, if you will, and it's not just like the umami of all the ingredients, which you can achieve, like this wonderful blend of tastes after you cook them a certain way or at a certain time. You have this morale effect of the stew. It's I think I wrote about a number of these. It's just wonderful.
That one of the things you mentioned is the spiritual effect of the food, and a lot of the older people, especially in my family, if you ate an animal, animals weren't supposed to ever be wasted. There was that you could not waste any part of the animal anywhere. And one of the reasons,
because it died for you. I mean, that's
yes, it died for you. It died so you can live. And so in Texas, the hogs were actually you were talking about hunting and things like that. Wild hogs have always been an issue in Texas, and they aren't an issue when you're hungry, though, because you can go hunt them. There's a difference between javelinas and hogs too. Javelinas are a different animal, but they're still a hog. You can actually eat the meat if you make sure you cut out the glands right and all that kind of stuff. But there's a reason that people held it in such high esteem, and they used everything. Like I said, they talked about from the pig, they would use everything, the snout to the tail and in between, because it was so important, and you get your life sustenance from this. And so when we write about these people eating and what they're eating and how they're preparing it, and how they got it in the first place, there's different characters and how they approach it, and that way, that whether or not the character is careless with it and throws it out, or if the society just throws things away because they don't want it, or if they use everything. These are little hints that we can give our readers about how these characters actually live. One of my main characters actually has been raised as a vegan, and or as a semi says a vegetarian. I had to live that way for a while because I actually had a medical condition. Every time I'd eat meat, I would nearly die. And it was a gallbladder issue. I could not eat meat to save my life. And I ended up on a lot of beans and rice, and I still had to take supplements. And one of the main driving points, like you said, of her diet is the fact that she has to go back to the people who hold her in their thrall to get the supplements she needs in order to live, because she is so devoted as a vegetarian, almost a vegan. There's two things that she can have that they're allowed. They're allowed to have eggs, and they're allowed to have a little dairy when they're allowed it, but they aren't allowed to have much. And they're supposed to live off a plant-based diet. So she has to get her supplements to help keep her alive. And one of the questions that they have in the story is, how do you live if you don't have those supplements? What's going to happen to your diet? Are you really being held in a thrall of an oppressive government because they tell you can only eat certain things, or you have to eat a certain way? And she is being forced to confront some of her biggest demons, which is she does not want to eat meat. She wants to remain kind to animals. She loves everything she sees. When she sees a baby pig, she cries. The watcher's like, this is going to be good eating. He's ready. He killed a calf. He had an absolute walleye fit about it. And this is based on my real experience. I have a ranch, y'all. I am all for farming. I love cowboys. I love people that go hunting. You put an animal in front of me and I will just absolutely bawl into a wall of tears because I cannot kill this thing. I am the worst. I am the worst farmer, the worst hunter. I can't go fishing half the time. I love meat, but it's so hard for me to kill an animal. And so Rose, when she looks at these little animals and she's like, oh, I'm saving this baby animal. And the watcher's literally like, you see these teeth? Do you see these teeth? I have fangs. I'm going to be eating meat tonight, woman. And she's literally just bawling because he's going to kill this calf. Having gone through this as a farmer, as a rancher, where you're like, I don't want to, eat my pet. That's why I can't go out in the farmyard because everything becomes a pet to me. And so those little dynamics between, how a certain diet, and you don't want to eat the things that somebody else eats. And I know we've all been through this, where you go to the school lunch the first time and they have some sort of weird business on your plate, and you're like, I've never seen that. My children would come to Mexico when I was a teacher, as a preschool teacher, and the bread looked different. They were actually, they came from a deep part of Mexico, it was out in Guadalajara somewhere, and this was not what they were expecting to eat. And so I'll try to find something on the plate, and I would explain, okay, this is made from this. This is a pan, but not pan dulce. It wasn't pan dulce. It was bread, but it didn't look like bread. It didn't look like a tortilla. And so we had to talk about all these different things. Characters overcoming their fear of eating something different is another big thing, because I love Malabar spinach. If you call it spinach, people go, this isn't spinach. If you go, hey, I've got this great exotic leaf, then you cut it up and sort of fry it up like nopales. Nopales is another thing that I love to put into the story, because if you've ever had it's a cactus pad, it's a prickly pear cactus, and tunas off the fruit. That's a little purple fruit. But you got to prepare it just right. You have to burn off those spines, and you have to cut it up. And nopales, when oh my gosh, they're so good. I love nopales. But people would never think of it. They would say, oh, you're going to eat a cactus. You're out of your mind. You have to know how to do it, and you have to know how to prepare it in such a way that it becomes a wonderful surprise. And so when you're talking about, yes, I love nopales with eggs, fresh nopales. When you cut it, and I say it's getting those spines off. You don't get them off, it'll kill you. It will. You can actually hurt yourself bad on nopales and tunas. So you have to. It's not just peeling them. You can peel them, and you won't get off those spines. You have to burn it off. And so you put it over that open fire or something that'll sizzle that off of there, and you can feed it to animals. It's high in vitamin A, vitamin C. In fact, it's one of the fastest ways, if you're in a survival situation, to get vitamin C in your diet, is to go find those nopales and to eat them. And
liquids, probably.
I actually seen this.
Liquids, right?
There's a lot of liquids in it, and I seen this awesome survival video that's all about like survival out in the wilderness. And he got one of those. He got off all the spinas and stuff, cooked them off, and then he kind of got a piece of stick, shoved it in the middle after he opened it up, and then he put it in the fire again until it hardened. And he took the stick out and he used it as a pouch to gather water. And then he used it in the pouch to warm the water.
Ooh,
Or
smart.
he grabbed 2 hot stones and threw it in the water, and it started boiling for him.
Dude, okay, so you're telling me you can use the petunias to make the water, the prickly pear itself?
Yes. Turned it upside down, got off all the spinas, then put something to kind of hold it open, and then he kind of cooked it till it stiffened.
Yeah, it's got that like a slit on the inside, like it'll open up and you're done.
Yes.
That juice.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
That's after he extracted it all, and then he warmed it up until it stiffened, and then he used it as just a pouch.
That is.
By the way, when you said like using stones to boil the water, I remember the thing that we have here. It's a way of cooking from the old days, where they had to hide, and they would hunt something. They would hunt let's say a deer, and they would skin it. They would wrap it in its skin. Basically, they will dig a pit. They will put some rocks around it and over it, and they will cover it with coals, and then they will bury it. And like 12 hours later, they will unbury it and eat it. And there are cases that they would leave it like for 24 hours or more.
Yeah, because it's still hot.
Yeah.
Like barbacoa.
Mm-hmm.
And James, you know how to do barbacoa?
Yes, I've done it at least once.
Oh, how you do it?
You know what? I'm totally blanking right now. I know I did it at least once, but it's been a while.
It's barbecue.
Oh, and by the way, James posted the recipe for Ochata. Yeah, in the description of the video, guys. And I will give one of my most beloved stew recipes. It's not as simple. I will advise you to try and cook a little bitty itsy very small pot first, and see if it's okay for you, because it's usually it's celebratory stew. It's not something that we cook every day. So I'll give you the recipe.
You know, the last time I think I cooked barbacoa, it was slow cook overnight, 8 hours.
Good job.
Yeah, that's usually kind of what I go for. Just throw it in the throw it in the pot cooker, let that do thing.
Dude.
Liver is so good. Oh yeah, liver.
And you're right about this. When you have to hide out, what do you do about food? And one of the main points I'm writing the Road trilogy right now for Watcher of the Damned. So there's the first 3 books is the world building and meeting the characters and doing everything. The second 3 books, they end up in a primitive city where they're trying to survive. The third set of 3 books is the Road trilogy, and they're on the road, but they're hiding. So you're right about this. Black Knight, they can't cook on an open fire because
everyone will see it. Yeah.
Yes. And also you have drones coming. So one of the ways you find people, believe it or not, in the wilderness is you can smell people. You can smell the actual scent of people, and you can smell cooking. If you smell food, it is a signal that they will draw people in from miles. You would be amazed at when people are hungry, they smell you cooking. So, and of course, we actually have a scene in it's in the 3rd book, in Babe's Blood, where they have a giant barbecue pit, and it actually is how to put the stones in, and how they cook the calf and butcher it first, and then lay it back in and cook it, and put some burlap sacks over. It's what you do here in Texas, or you put something over the top of it, wet it down, and then you let it steam a little bit while you cook it. And so we actually built a pit barbecue, and then we put all the animal stuff in there. But as they get underway on the road, they're on the run. They don't have time to do a barbecue pit. You can cook in the ground if you could stay put, but when you're on the run and you have to hide, how do you eat? How do you live on the road? Camp cooking, which is another thing. Using a Dutch oven or having a chuck wagon. How do you hide those smells? Well, if you're in a post-industrial society, if there are fires burning nearby, a lot of times old coal mines will burn. We've had a lot of those, and especially in the Soviet Union, there's a couple of places where there's actually been burning. In Centralia, Pennsylvania, there's a coal seam that's been burning since the 1960s. So if you can hide your footprint by putting yourself in a situation like that, of course you're close to pollutants, but hey, you can at least eat a hot meal. But when you're on the run like that, how do you actually make food? And that's usually when you go back to jerky, beef jerky, which has been salted, smoked, dried strips. You can also do that with fish. And then you have pemmican, which of course is that recipe. And I think I've had somebody ask me for it before, and I will probably make a Watcher the Dam cookbook because they cook so much in this dang book. I think it's because I'm hungry all the time when I'm writing, but also my characters are very large men. They're very testosterone laden and they're hungry all the time. They are literally starving. They have to keep that muscle built up. And if you've ever lived with somebody that's a bodybuilder or who's a professional athlete or a person who just likes to stay fit and they're out working land all the time, they eat constantly. They need about 3,000 calories to be that big giant dude that you're looking at there. And at least 3,000
and to do all the stuff that they have to do, like to lift all the heavy thing. Yep.
Fuel. And so they have to have, even if you get bored with the food, it's kind of like Lembas in Lord of the Rings or whatever, they get tired of eating the fairy bread. And so it's when you're living in that type of society. And so we actually went to, how do you make those jerkies? How do you have somebody making it for you? Do you take it on the road? How do you keep it clean? And
or
so there's nothing but campfire cooking. And so I'm probably going to make a Watcher the Dam cookbook just because we have to have all these different ways to eat. There are places where there's a feast, but the feast is very
fun.
And I think that's going to be the feast, for instance, is cornbread, ham, because if you've got enough sugar, or if you've got salt, you can make ham, or smokers. If you have a smoker, you can do that. And so the feast is literally cornbread and ham and greens, because collard greens, because they're like sauerkraut, which is able to be preserved easily if you do it the right way. And you do it with sugar. A lot of times it's really good that way, actually. So that feast is so simple, but in that story, that is the feast they have available to them. And then there's the practically freeze-dried Little Debbie snack cakes. They aren't called Little Debbie's in the story. They're like Twinkies. Have you ever had a Twinkie that's been in a package for like 20? I have one. I will show it to you next time I come on here. I actually saved one back. It's like
Fallout Twinkies.
It is a Twinkie in the package for like 20 years, and it does not. They're undying. They do not go away. Oh, that is so cool.
They're eternal.
I love that so much. I just
I found the video.
James, I'm going to get that from you. I am going to put this in the story because I have a scene where they need to do something like that, and they didn't have gourds available, and they don't have something, so I'm going to have them use that. So that is amazing. That is just so cool.
Yeah, I'll find a link. I'll post the link in the chat.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned like preserving like the Twinkies, I remembered something which I did is some research for that was like the rations, like the old military rations. You can watch like videos of people eating 40-year-old rations, even older, like rations from the Second World War. And some of the stuff, guys, inside these rations are okay, like super okay, tasty even.
Really?
Well, of course, some things are like they can't be eaten, but a lot of the things are actually eatable. And I based on this, I did like some more research, and like how do you survive in space? Let's say you crash on some derelict space station. Would you eat alien rations, alien MREs, if you find like some dead alien astronaut and you
It's,
scavenge his or her like spacesuit, and you find like some MRAs, would you eat them? Let's say this happened. This person died like 200 years ago, but this is like the vacuum of space. This is outer space.
yeah,
Would you eat them?
I if you can test, if you can taste test it, and that's actually the hard thing for human beings. We have a very specific palate. It's the reason we love sugars so much is because most plants, not all, but most plants that actually have that sweet sugar in it is human kind. It's kind to humans. You can actually probably eat it. And there's just a minute traces of that's why fruit is so desired is it has the sugar in it. You can immediately taste it and go, oh, this is good for me. I can go ahead and probably eat this. Not in huge quantities. You'll be sad if you do. But sugar is how you taste it to see if it has it. And then you would like, okay, it's got a little bit of sugar. But what if they put sugar in something we can't eat? It'd be like, oh my gosh, it's like my body can't digest this. I'm going to die. Um, yeah, I think that it's. I would say any world where you've had it post-industrial, there are things that are still going to be there. They're available to eat even 50 years later in the package if it's sealed properly. And there's some things that will just turn to dust. I've actually done this where you pull it out like that. The chips are just like crumbles and there's nothing left. And then there are things that look, like I said, they're just sort of like a chewy version of what you had before, and they can become commodities. You could actually one of my in Caballero, excuse me, in the Hellbilly Highway, one of the characters is bought off by a box of snack treats that are still, and they're literally you could knock a man out with them, but they're so desirable because they were baked goods from before, and they still survive in their little plastic baggie, and so they actually buy their way into a different society just by handing out these snack cakes. And so there are things that will survive, and if they're preserved properly, I mean, the truth is you're probably eating is probably half plastic, but when you crave a little Debbie snack cake, that's what you want, is you want
If you crave them Twinkies, you will eat the Twinkies,
that.
even if they smell like plastic. It's not
I,
you won't care. Yeah. Especially Lily, especially the Tazaran rations, like the Tazaran rations, the cheap quality ones, they smell. And I forgot to say that we might cook like the best, the most delicious smelling food, but someone with a different like
yeah,
physiology that might like this super delectable food for which is for us like incredibly tasty, it might like this might reek like crap to them.
that actually does happen because when I wasn't eating meat for a while, actually, I had to ease back into it, and it'll smell weird to you. You'll smell meat or something cooking, and if you haven't had it for a long time, it'll be like, especially if it's not really fresh, you'll know right away. It'll hit you wrong, and
Oh yeah.
I'm sure that aliens or somebody else, if they smelled something that was, and it's just that Rose, when she smells, the barbecued calf, all she's this dead cow. They're burning a dead cow, and she's just nauseated by the whole idea. And so going over that, not everybody eats the same thing. I think that would be an interesting way of doing an alien society where they're walking in and it's like, oh, they were burning something on a fire. And then they stuffed
These
it in.
barbarians, these stupid barbarians, they're still burning their food. Ha ha ha.
That's right. They're not cooking it the right way.
Uh,
Talked
yeah,
about
Also, guys, if
go ahead.
any of you if anybody in the chat have any questions, we'll be going over any question you guys have
yeah. This is the
near the end of
last
the
half
show.
hour. Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't have any questions, it's still fine. Still good. That's uh, when we are talking about the alien perception of like even in our little planet, when I've had like a guy from Africa when I was in the university, and he would like, how can you Bulgarians eat this yogurt thing? It's like it smells like it's repugnant.
I know.
Like he literally he was we were drinking like there is a special drink which is like it's very simple, but it's made from yogurt and water and stuff. And we were drinking it with the puff pastries, the salty puff pastries that we almost like we eat almost every morning for breakfast. And he was like, "Oh no, I can't! This like it smells vile. No, I can't. No!" And he was like, it took him 2 years to overcome the smell and finally taste it. And when he tasted it, he loved it. And then he found out he was lactose intolerant.
Oh no!
No. But he loved it so much, and he was like, "No, I want to drink it, but no,
I
I'm
know.
lactose intolerant." Oh,
Usually your body will kind of tip you off, maybe, but
yeah,
not.
yeah, yeah. And this is one of the things that kind of uh, helped me create an aspect of the physiology of the Zentari race in Star Shatter. And they have like their sense of smell is really heightened, and they also have these glands in their noses. And like when we smell something and we know that something is very tasty, we kind of salivate.
Yeah.
Is the Zentari noses drip instead when they know that something is very tasty, and like their noses will drip, and they also always have like a handkerchief, and they kind of like politely wipe their nose.
They like to excuse themselves. Durian does that to some people. I love to take
Ooh,
durian extract, and there are people who just hate the smell. They just hate it. It doesn't hit them right.
they just vomit.
They don't
I've
want
watched
to
videos.
do
Yeah.
with durian. That and Szechuan pepper, which actually we have it grows here in Texas. It's off the uh, off of a tree, actually, the xanthophyllum family, and it's used also called toothache tree. And the seeds, when you put it into an oil, it's like the first time it hits you, you're like, I don't even know what this flavor is because it doesn't really fit. But Szechuan pepper is just one of those things that stays with you. It's like the first time people who haven't had a really good hot sauce. And James, you said you really don't care for spicy foods.
Yeah, not really. My tongue's never gotten used to it.
Has any of your family tried to attack you for your sins?
Oh, absolutely, all the time.
How dare you?
I know,
Oh,
dare you?
it's offensive. It's offensive to some.
There's a reason why in Texas we love those spicy foods, and one of the things is that capsaicin and the vinegar that's used to make those hot sauces actually does help protect your. First of all, it protects your stomach from certain bacteria. You are not going to get a gastric ulcer if you eat hot sauce because it kills that bacteria H pylori. And so people that have developed this affinity for it, they're killing off bacteria and things that were in there. And we talked about the fact that some people can just smell food; it makes them sick. My mother, when we were talking about uh, food poisoning, because she grew up and she was actually born in the 20s, and she grew up on a farm. She had a dirt floor shack she lived in. She actually lived in a dirt floor cabin, and she could smell food and tell you if it was going bad. Smell it right away. She didn't like putting a lot of sauces on food because she said it would hide the smell. And to even when I was a child, she would taste food from a can first, 30 minutes before she would share it with the family. So if it was bad, she would be the one to die and not us. She was that kind of person. But so there are people who are so attuned; they have a certain smell that they smell, and if they're not used to it or they don't know what it is, it will repel them from the food, and that is a protective mechanism. And when you're doing this with your characters, I think that you can actually introduce this. What are they afraid of? What is the smell that drives them away that everybody else just loves? I love the idea that there's something delicious that they're just really enjoying, and the rest of the characters are like, this is the most horrible thing I've ever seen. But they're really afraid of what might happen if they eat it.
That
Yeah.
actually, it reminds me of a scene from a movie that centered around food, and it was kind of like this science fiction, mind bending body horror movie.
Oh,
And they're like, it's like these people are in a video game, they don't know what's going on, they're kind of just going with it in this VR world, and they're sitting down, they're about to have a meal, and they order the special, and they bring this like bowl of strange mutated fish, and this
Oh,
guy and is just compelled to eat it, while everybody else just looks at him in complete grotesque fashion. And that's a great way of showing a clash of culture as well, where one would really enjoy this meal that's meant for all right in front, while the others kind of look trying to be, polite, but at the same time, literally grossed out from what's
Yep.
happening right in front of them. And I think that that's a great narrative, thrust forward to even kind of create smaller conflicts within a story.
no, yeah, and actually, it was my father, and I say once again, my father was. I was raised by old people, and so because they didn't have me until I was in the 40s, so I'm from another century. We were taught that you had to, if somebody served you food, you had to take it. You had to at least try it, and then you would have to say something like, "Oh, I'm so full, I can't eat anymore," because it was impolite to not eat the food. And the reason why was because this was a gift of love. And my father, actually, who had served in the Philippines during World War II, he said there were people that had nothing left. They came out and they would give them the only food they had. You could not refuse it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when a person goes in and they cook you a meal,
The same
They're-
here.
their spirit is being put into it. You don't know what their circumstances are, and that you might not like the way their kitchen looks, or you might think, wow, there's a hog in the backyard. I don't know if I want to eat. Maybe they didn't wash their hands. This human being just made you a meal. And you can find out. That's one of the reasons when you're talking about the beer, you actually have a beer or a wine with it, because you take that sip and there's alcohol in it. It can help kill the bacteria. But so you had this gorgeous thing that maybe somebody made you this feast, or maybe they're offering you a banana leaf with a drink you've never drank before, which is what happened to my dad. And they offered him the only food that he had. And he said, no, it was terrible. It was terrible. He admitted. He still sipped it anyway. He still shared it. Those people literally, they made him family because they gave him their food. And especially when that old woman comes out, don't you tell her no. She may be magical. You don't know. You never refuse that old woman. She comes up, she's offering you. You tell her how much thank you, and you give her grateful praise for it. Take a little sip. Make sure, she might be a witch. Maybe she'll turn you into a frog or something. But at least she'll care about it. Ate her food. So, these are things that we sometimes miss in our stories. That these are not just for conflict, but for bonding. Somebody who offers you the only thing they've got, and maybe it's just off of where they snap their fingers and it comes out of the machine. But energy comes from somewhere, and especially when it's from a fire or a war-torn region, and somebody brings out this one thing, and it's all they've got. And that actually is a pivotal scene in Caballeros del Camino and Help Highway. Caballeros del Camino, where there's the feast, and it's a feast with only ham and cornbread and some. It's just a good old Southern cook, and she's actually making a wonderful the caregiver is the woman that makes these meals. And when she makes this thing, she literally creates this feast out of all she has, and she makes a cake. And it is not the cake that Rose was expecting, because Rose is coming from a more industrialized society, and they still have things like cake made with white flour. But this is a jujube cake, and jujube cakes are made very different. They're little bricks, and it's made almost like a tiny loaf, and it has the jujube fruit in it, which can be grown here in Texas. And it is made with a tiny bit of white flour because it's all they have left. And to Rose, this is the treasure beyond all treasures for two reasons. First of all, it's the only thing on that table that does not have hog meat in it or hog fat. Because if you have never made a meal from the country, you will realize that if there's a pig on the table, it goes in everything. There's going to be lard and everything. It's going to make everything so delicious. This was the one thing that didn't have lard in it. It was just made just straight up the way it was supposed to be, as a jujube cake. And Rose is so ecstatic over this one tiny piece of food. And there's an actual recipe that goes with it. And the other characters are enchanted because they haven't had a white flour cake for 50 years since the happening happened. And so they're excited to have this one little piece of cake, knowing how it was created and this old woman made it for them. It becomes a magical item that has importance in the story because it represents more than just cake. It represents love and family and how we interact with each other when we're given a gift made with somebody else's hands.
Yeah, it's I see we have like two questions. I kind of missed the first one, which is addressed to me. Um, and question was from High Point. Um, my
Wait.
question is, how did you decide Star Shutter is the name of the ship? Well, it's actually it was it's based on like the core lore of the universe that a thing about shattered stars and the person, the engineer who finished that ship, um, he expected, because the ship was made just like they launched it during the invasion of 1969, the pirate lord Mahim's invasion, and they fully expected that Earth will be shattered, and
Really?
everything will be lost. And if they said that everything would be lost inevitably, then they would name this last ship the Shatterer of Stars, and it
Well,
will go into battle, and it will be its first and its her first and her last battle. But the that's the story behind the name. So
it's also just really cool. It's like Star Shatter. He said it sounds awesome.
yeah, it's I kind of I was debating it. I was debating it for a couple of months actually,
That's a
but
while to debate a
I'm
name.
I'm glad I picked this, like, because it's in the lore. Yeah.
Also, it has beautiful alliteration with it. And actually, both of y'all have this. You have World Without End. And one of the things that's wonderful about World Without End is it's not just the first consonant that alliterates, it's actually the world without end. It's all the way that it flows together through the consonants and everything and the vowels.
Oh,
And say
thank you.
Shatter, Star Shatter has this. There's something about alliterative titles that become poetic, and people remember them better because you have this alliterative quality to it. And I love that repetition in both of y'all's names on it. It makes it so easy for me to remember those. There's been other things I've been on that was harder because they're great titles, but they're hard to remember immediately. I can always remember Star Shatter. I can always remember World Without End because it just flows. It just comes off the tongue like that.
Yeah, I strategically tried to make something simpler. But we got our second question here. Where do you guys think culture fusion food might be integrated in fiction? I mean,
Hmm. Why
cul-
don't you answer this, James?
culture fusion food, as in like a fusion of two separate cultures into one.
Mm-hmm.
I
Or
think
more?
in World Without End, we have two major kingdoms. One of them goes through strife because they're like in a desert location, and the other one actually helps them out by sending them the abundance of food that they have in their territories. So one way that you can, or at least how I've done it in my own writing, is in a way of aid. You know, there's all this food that's abundant here. You are in a desert. You don't have too much. One kingdom helps out another. Now, over time, they find out that that other kingdom, that's one of the one helping out is the daughter knights or the daughter king, the kingdom of daughter, and the ones that were receiving are the Whitlonians or the kingdom of Whitlow when they were young. But the daughter knights would use food to kind of insert themselves into their affairs and over time have one kingdom dependent on them, so that way they could kind of just say, well, you know, we could just stop the food flow if you don't want to do business with us. But that's kind of how you can infuse it, almost infuse food as a form of politics as well as almost like sharing one culture's food with another when they're first meeting. I remember in a multitude of stories that I've read, when there's like this official meeting of two different people, they exchange food, or one of them brings like a
Oh yeah,
basket
that's the
of food.
first. That's the first thing. Yeah.
Yes, there's always something like that going on. Or you can look to our world, and I think one of the most interesting fusions of cultures is the breakfast burrito. Something
Yay!
very
Or the kimchi tacos, like Lily said, kimchi
yes,
tacos.
or chai tea. Chai
Ooh.
tea is an interesting one because it's actually black tea that was imported
Yeah,
into India, which they added in their own
I,
spices to give it that extra flavor. And chai in itself, I believe, just
I love.
means tea.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we
It
say
just means
chai
team.
tea, it's
That's
like saying
that's the
tea.
yeah. Mm,
Yeah, I would say that
yeah.
also that
It's
you're right about this. That first meeting, especially if there's already conflict, when you're talking about that fusion of where I love what you're doing with yours, where you're talking about the fact that there's actually this dependence that was created dependence. Mine is more between classes type of created dependence, but you can actually have nationally created dependencies on foods. I think it'd be fascinating to read this in your story, James, where you're literally like hungry and you're having to deal with this country. That's where you're getting your food from. That's a kind of a scary thought, and I think it would write up
Yeah.
fantastic.
Sooner or later, I have a lot to write. I got so much short stories planned out that I got to try to tackle them all one after the other, where they're all in different genres and require different kind of attention. So it's going to be interesting, but I'll eventually get down to that one. I got
of
a
course you will.
large back
That's
catalog.
and if you need some like some weird input, you can always you can always call us.
Yeah, I
We'll
rewatch.
confuse you even more.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, mine going to take place between the people that have been scavenging for food and people that are actually growing it. In Hellbilly Highway, we actually have a faction. A little bit of a spoiler. We have a faction that they are living inside the abandoned strip malls, where there's a continuous thread of abandoned strip malls that just back right up to each other, and they can walk into these little strip malls and sort of hide out from everybody. It's like a tunnel filled with all of the artificial potato chips and snack cakes and everything else that have been left over from the last century. And then you have the people that are out in the country that have been growing things like corn and stuff, and they're trying to come in and bring in things that they've scavenged or things that they've had. And there's going to be a feast there, yes, where literally you'll have foods that were prepackaged from 50 years ago that people have found, and they've gotten these things that they've gotten together. And then you have the agriculture, and there's city versus country, but in this case it's the hellbillies versus the survivors of the Teos co-op, who are trying to come together and have some sort of alliance. And so
The
yeah,
hillbillies versus the mall, the strip mall billies.
yeah, that's right, all hillbillies. And so you've got the strip maulers going up against the survivors of the country, and they've got to come to an alliance so that way they can get together and make their peace, so they can have passage through the underground of the hellbillies strip mall. And that's, I think that when you're talking about that fusion of cultures, it will happen no matter which culture you're in, whether it's fiction or if it's reality. Just two families coming together. If you ever had anybody get married in your family where they're not from the same place, there's always going to be different food, and somebody brings that one thing, and it's like it's a Jello salad. And I know, I'm going to tell you right now, I know my grandmother loved Jello salad. I have never been able. It's the thing with peas in it, and it's like in this clear jelly. I have never been. I don't know why, but they would love this thing, and I could not eat it. They would bring that to your party, and so like the in-laws come in and they've got this thing, whatever it is, and you're like, I'm not eating that. And they're like, you will eat it because that's going to be your sister-in-law. You better eat that food. And so there comes a piece where you have to actually eat from this other family's food in order for you to survive. So we're giving out real life tips here today. Thank you, folks, for listening to my TED talk about how to get along with your in-laws. Eat their food and don't say a word if you don't like it.
Yep, yep.
You should love it. I'm really blessed because my future in-laws that I've got for my son actually cook really, really good. They're from Arkansas, so I'm going to be getting all that barbecue. So, yay!
Yep. Uh, well, guys, we are nearing the end of the stream.
No.
Well,
Love this
yeah,
stream. It's about what I love, which is food. You're not seeing me started.
yes, yes, but you have to. I mean, you have to go.
I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, I think an hour and a half is plenty of time to talk about this stuff. Um, I I will of course have the stuff ready for our next stream, which hopefully, just like this one and the previous one, will happen on time and without any technical difficulties. Like God willing, everything will be fine. So please, guys, tell our viewers where they can find your work.
Okay, who starts? Is it me?
Yeah, go ahead. You started
The
off for me.
chatty one? Okay, that's fine. Y'all sit there and think while I talk. You can find me at watchofthedam.com. You can also find me at flow.page/RH Snow. That's flow.page, FLOW.page, PAGE, /RH Snow. And there's all of my links on there and my YouTube channel. And I'm just a little YouTuber. And my book, which I have books, which are I'm now writing number 9. We already have a 6-book series out and completed, and we have Trail of Travail for the start of the 2nd book. And I also have a TTRPG that's associated with it, a little module that we put together for it just for fun. And so get on out there and see what we got. I love you guys so much, and this story is for you. So if you love science fiction, if you love fantasy, if you love westerns, and you love romance and revolution, then Watcher of the Damned might be right up your alley. And I suggest take a peek at it today. And of course, I love you all, and we will be free. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Thank you for letting me be on this show with you guys. Y'all are so sweet to let me on.
You're not going to escape us that easily.
No, I feel like I talk too much.
No, 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 no. You're not going to run away. No, no, no. I'm sending freaking Isaac to track you down. Don't you dare.
Oh my gosh! No,
Uh, James?
Okay, if you guys want to check out my stuff, you can actually subscribe to this channel right here. I actually post lyrical music videos that are used as like a pseudo faction introduction for the various factions in my world. That's World Without End. I write short stories in there, and currently I'm releasing lore drops on my Substack through the form of lore cards, and they're kind of set out in a magazine spread with pages of lore to kind of satiate the readers as I write the stories in the back end. I'm going to try to release them as often as possible. I have a handful of stories you can already check out at my Substack. That's worldwithoutendlore.substack.com. So go check that out.
And let me tell you something. I am a fan of James. I have loved your stuff way before this, and you make me feel like I'm just absolute chopped liver compared to you. Your Substack is so beautiful. The lore drops are so fantastic. I'm like, I need to do something like this. It looks great. So yes, please check it out. It's wonderful.
Well, I guess it's my turn now. Well, you guys, if you like alternate history, space opera, science fiction with lots of space magics, different wholesomely weird races, and not so wholesome evil ones, including uplifted hamsters, bunnies, etc. And the stomping of slavers, like the curb stomping of slavers in every way imaginable, including by way of thought itself. You could go to Amazon and grab any of my Star Shatter books, or you could go to my Substack, which is the Black Knight Substack.com. and you can read the stories, like the serialized stories that I post there.
Yes.
Currently, my brand new fantasy, which is a pure fantasy novella, which is, let's say, it's going to be a series. I will spill the beans, and I will say that it's going to be a series. Um, and Yeah, an age of lost songs. So far, everyone has loved it. So
You are the most prolific writer I have ever seen. I have never seen somebody write as much and as well as you do. It's just constant. It is the most bang for your buck you will ever get. You need to subscribe to Black Knight. He is absolutely awesome.
wait, thanks. Um, and I see that we have the links, all of our links in the chat. So that's that. Oh, it's been fun again,
Right.
and it's
See you
going to
guys.
be more fun next time.
Absolutely. Next Tuesday, we'll have other themes for you guys to check out. We'll see about letting you know beforehand. Maybe I'll post it on my Twitter and stuff. Um, Keep an eye on the channel. Please subscribe. Let us know if you want to go ahead and share the link of the recording to all your friends who are writers out there who need a bit of inspiration. And you just want to grow this and build inspiration for more and more writers.
Yeah, that's the goal. That's the main goal.
All
That's it.
righty,
Spread the hope.
guys. Right. Bye bye, everybody. Bye bye.
I love you.